This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's oral history program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on the 19th of June, 1972. The interview was conducted by Mr. Pendleton Woods. The interviewee is Mr. DeWitt, and that's capital D-E, capital W-I-T-T, Waller, capital W-A-L-L-E-R, of Enid, Oklahoma. This material is being re-recorded on July the 1st, 1986 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener. There is no introduction for this material on this tape. All of the information concerning this interview was taken from the index sheets.
A number of things, including particular Enid and education and athletics. Mr. Waller, I think usually when we start an interview, we usually ask a person to give their name, and then we ask for you to tell us who your parents were and where they were from and your mother's maiden name. This gives us the basic background information. So give us your name and your parents' name.
My name is DeWitt Waller. My father was Reverend I.K. Waller. He was a Methodist minister in Texas and Oklahoma for a good many years. And he was from Georgia. He's a Georgia man. And my mother is Josephine Johnson. She is a Texas woman. She was born and raised in Texas, I think.
Where were you born, Mr. Waller?
I was born at Mason, Texas.
Mason, Texas.
July the 13th, 1888.
1888. When did you come to Oklahoma for the first time?
I came to Oklahoma in 1907.
Did you come to Enid then?
No, I moved to McAllister Colgate from Texas. Then we went to McAllister. And I lived in those two places, and then in Medill and Wynnewood and Ardmore and Elk City.
All before you came to Enid.
All before we came to Enid.
We might just briefly mention those towns, tell something about them. You came first in the Colgate area.
Yes.
What years were you there?
Well, let's see.
Was this
I
traveling?
was just there a year.
Was this traveling with your father as a preacher?
Yeah.
When he was preaching. What do you remember about Colgate at that time?
Well, it was a coal town, of course. Coal mining was their principal industry. It wasn't a very large town. It was pretty pioneer in those days.
Of course, coal was more important then than it is now.
Yes, it
was Colgate larger then, or is it about the same?
Well, I don't think Colgate's grown very much. I think it's just about like it was then.
I suspect this new lumber boom has has that affected Colgate recently, or do you know? It's Weyerhaeuser Company.
No, I think that's further on southeast.
It doesn't affect Colgate. Now, when were you in Ardmore?
Let's see now. I was in Ardmore. My father was district superintendent of the Ardmore district, and I was there about, let's see,
Just about.
8, 9, and 10.
8, 9. That was ahead
9 and 10, rather.
That was just a little ahead of the oil boom there. What was Ardmore like then?
Well, Ardmore was a little bit more frontier than Colgate. It was a pretty good-sized town and quite a good business town at that time.
By frontier, why don't you describe Ardmore?
Oh, well, you know what I mean by frontier in Oklahoma. It was pretty, kind of rough, and like most of those early Oklahoma towns were in that part of the state. It was a good town, though. It was a good business town.
I understood it became rougher after all
Yeah.
was discovered.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, the now where did you go to school?
I finished my high school work in San Antonio. I lived in San Antonio, Texas, longer than any other place besides Enid. I took most of my high school work at Peacock Military Academy there. It's still a flourishing institution, as I understand it. And then when we came to McAllister, I finished my high school work there. And I went to school at Epworth University. That's now Oklahoma City University. And I played baseball and football and was all Oklahoma center and end for a couple of years.
What years did you play
And
on?
I graduated there in 1911. I played 8, 9, and 10. We had pretty good teams in those days. We played Oklahoma University both years. I remember that in 9 they beat us 1 point, 12-11, and in 10 it was a tie score, 3-3.
They were called the Gold Bugs then, weren't they?
No.
They weren't?
Mm-mm.
They called Gold Bugs after then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were they called? What was the OCU team called?
Let's see. I don't think we had a name like that. I think they just called us the Epworthians.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It was not called
That
OCU.
was a Methodist school.
Yeah. And it wasn't called OCU then.
No.
So, I suspect maybe they started calling them Gold Bugs when it became OCU.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you describe the Epworth College of that time?
Well, I think that's one of the tragedies of educational history in Oklahoma. When I was at Epworth, they had schools of law and medicine and dentistry, and had a very good enrollment, almost as large as the University of Oklahoma at that time. But it was strictly a Methodist school, and the North and South got into some trouble, the Northern Methodists and the Southern Methodists, and so they finally moved up to Guthrie, and it was there, I think 2 or 3 years at Oklahoma Methodist University.
They moved to Guthrie after you attended?
Mm-hmm.
And they had a school of dentistry?
Mm-hmm. Medicine, law.
Hmm.
That's a good school.
Yeah.
Let it go by the board.
Did it cut back when it went up to Guthrie?
Uh-huh.
And of course, it's basically a liberal arts school now in
Yes.
business. Liberal arts business, but a good school.
Well, I think they've got law. I think they're putting in medicine.
They do have law. They do have law. I don't think they don't have medicine. They do have law.
I think they're thinking about it.
I didn't know they put in medicine.
They haven't yet.
No, medicine's pretty expensive.
Yes.
You know, with
Oh, yeah.
the equipment that they need
It
for
sure
medicine,
is.
pretty expensive. Can you recall any of the professors or people who played a role in that early day that you remember, particular memorable people?
Well, I don't know whether you, C.S. McCrite was quite a leader. Do you know C.S. McCrite in Oklahoma City now? He's on the board of directors of Oklahoma Methodist University there at OCU.
OCU.
And let me see, I can't call their names right now.
Now, this was ahead of the time of Dr. E.G. Green, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
He came later.
Yeah.
Who was president of OCU, or of Epworth, when you were there?
What was his name? Stoddard? Oh, that don't seem right.
Well, not too
too
far.
funny. Well,
Uh,
I don't know that, but I.
Do you
I think I
remember, were there any particular other memorable people you can think of on faculty or such that played that you remember particularly as being outstanding or?
Well, no.
Now you
I'm having
played.
trouble recalling their names.
Oh, that's all right. It's I mean, it's sometimes there might not have been one that just stood out tremendously. See those things. In athletics, did you participate in athletics with anyone who became a nationally great?
Well, at that time, they didn't have pro football very much.
Yeah. Did you ever know Jim Thorpe? He was about that
Yeah.
period.
Mhm.
Did
I
you know
never
him?
played against him, but I know him.
But you never played against him. Did you know him when he was in athletics?
Yeah.
Tell us something about him.
Well, I don't know that much about
You
him.
don't?
All I know is just what you read about him in the newspaper.
Uh-huh.
I just knew him as a figure. I didn't
you
know
had
him
no
personally.
personal acquaintance
No,
with him.
not at all.
What caused you to decide to stay in athletics as a coach? You're going to coaching.
Well, the fact of the business is I never thought I'd go into the school business at all. When I graduated from Epworth University in 1911, my folks then moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and I went with them. And while I was there, I got a telegram from Oklahoma, from Enid High School, wanted me to come there as a teacher and a coach, and that's when I made up my decision to be a schoolman.
That's the reason I know you got an offer of a job.
Yeah, and that was back in the days when it might be interesting. I had never thought at that time of being a schoolman. I hadn't any education. I had no certificate at all. But back in those days, the Board of Education could issue certificates on their own. You didn't have to go to school and get one through the State Department. And they gave me theirs, and then I went on to Missouri University and graduated there with my master's degree. Then I did some additional work down at the University of Alabama in education.
During your period as a coach at Enid, can you tell about some of the people you produced as athletes who later became prominent nationally as a result of their playing in college or pro, either one?
Well, Heine Bass,
Yeah.
he played for me
Oh, did he?
when I was coach out there.
How was he? Was he a pretty good
Oh,
player?
he was a pretty good player, yes, he was.
What did he play?
He played tackle.
Mhm.
And Ed Wilmoth, you know Ed Wilmoth?
Yeah.
Well, Ed was another one.
Mhm.
He went on and played quarterback for the University of Oklahoma. And I was refereeing a game one day down at the University of Oklahoma between Missouri and Oklahoma. And they hadn't started the game, either one of them. They were both sophomores, but at a timeout, I looked up, and here come Heine from one side of the field, and here come Ed for the other, for Oklahoma, and they both reported to me. I thought that was kind of a coincidence, and I always will remember it because I enjoyed seeing those two guys come in there and report to me to play football because I was officiating.
Heine was playing, was he at Missouri?
Ed with OU.
What?
Ed with
And Ed was OU. How did Heine do it at Missouri? Did he?
Pretty good.
Did he? Can you think of any other players?
Well, Richard Triplett played center for me, and he went on and played at the University of Nebraska and made a very good record up there on one of their fine teams.
Among your teams that you had, now you coached from what years? What years did you?
Well, I started in the fall of 11.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I coached for 5 years.
For 5 years. You coached from 11 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
That was really
15.
before the days
Yeah.
of pro ball.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, did you get into administration, into school administration?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
After my 5 years as coach in science and mathematics teacher, I became principal of high school.
Can you think, what would you say was your most outstanding game as coach at Enid?
Well, I don't know. We always played the big ones. Oklahoma City Central was a big football team at that time, you know, and Shawnee and all those schools, Sapulpa. No, we didn't play Sapulpa then, later. Oh, I don't know. I think maybe the game we had, the postseason game with Veneta, where we were playing for the divisional championship, and we went over in Veneta, and I think we beat them 16-13. We had a fine game over there.
What was your best year?
Well, I'd say 14.
Mm-hmm. What did you do that year?
You mean in win and loss?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Did you win any championships?
No.
Mm-hmm. Did you win any conference championships during those years? Do you recall?
No.
Now, as principal of Enid High School, you were principal for a lot of years.
18.
18 years. Who were some of the pupils that you had in high school that who later became prominent, possibly in the state or nation, either one?
Well, oh gosh, there's so many of them.
Yeah. Well, name several. I mean, some of the people who might have been well known or might have either particular on a statewide basis, if you can think of any offhand.
Well, I'd think first of Heine and Ebb, but of course they weren't there when I was principal. They were there when I was coach and athletic director. Oh, I don't know. We've had a lot of doctors and lawyers and businessmen and all that sort of thing, but it'd be pretty hard for me to.
Can you think of any of the
names?
Can you think of any of the interesting things that might have happened while you were principal? Some of the funny things that might have happened. Maybe they weren't funny at the time. But maybe looking back, they would be.
Oh no, there were a lot of them. I remember when my oldest daughter Barbara was born, classes were a little bit ahead of themselves. They were going to start a walkout. You know, they do that now. They were going to start a walkout in celebration of her birth, but I got wind of it somewhere, and we postponed that and didn't have it. Oh,
You ever ransacked the principal's office?
Did they?
Yeah.
No.
They
were a little different those days.
Tamer days, weren't they? What would you think offhand was the most, the most satisfying single experience you had as an educator in your career? Well,
I would say that it was principal of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I enjoyed that position more than I did being superintendent or coach and teacher. There were so many opportunities you had to contact your pupils and get some good responses for them, and I believe that was my outstanding.
Can you think of any
pleasure.
event that happened during that period, or any events that happened that you thought were particularly interesting or outstanding in your memory?
Which period now are we
As
talking
a
about?
principal of high school.
Oh.
Any, it could have been an occasion, an activity, or something that happened in connection with an assembly or a football game, or...
Oh, I can't. They were pretty much run-of-the-mill experiences.
Let's talk about the Tri-State Band Festival. That began while you were principal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell about how'd that thing get started?
Well, the band director out at Phillips University, I think, was the man that started that band festival.
What was his name?
Um, Gosh, I don't know. He was here this spring festival. He still attends, but I can't.
How did it get started? Can you remember the first one?
No, not particularly. It goes back a long way, and it's much smaller in those days. He just had this idea that that would be a good idea for Phillips University and the local Chamber of Commerce, and they worked up a band festival, and I don't really remember the date of it. I think this was about the 40th renewal in this spring.
It was an anniversary when I remember that.
Yeah.
How many people participating now every year?
How many now?
Yeah.
Well, they have 4,000 or 5,000.
That's what I thought. They come from 8 or 10 states now,
Yeah,
don't they, instead of just
all
3
over.
states.
You call it Tri-State, but it takes in a lot more people.
Yeah,
than-
but it was
than
called
that.
Tri-State and still is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you recall any experiences? I mean, concerning the Tri-State. That I mean, I know it was sponsored there, but your high school, I'm sure, played a role in it. Your band certainly must have played a role in it. Do you recall anything in connection with that? That's an event Enid is certainly known for.
Oh, I remember about a 2 or 3 foot snow we had one time when we were going to have a band festival.
Tell about that.
In April,
How about?
and just about paralyzed everything, but they finally got it off by waiting a little bit.
How'd they have the marching contest in all that snow?
Well, it was gone by that time. It was April, you know, it don't last very long. But it surely snowed.
The what other event can you recall, or events of particular importance to Enid that occurred, maybe in or outside of the school experience? Like rodeos or parades, or people who may have come here as speakers who were nationally of note of some sort?
Well, I don't know. I remember one event we had way back then was we had a replica of the run.
Yeah.
They had a big parade and run out here west of town. It was quite interesting for everybody. I think everybody enjoyed it, and it got quite a bit of publicity. Oh, I don't know. I've seen Enid
Was this
go.
the Cherokee Strip run?
Yeah.
I believe that they made some movies of that too,
Yeah.
didn't they? And some of that's still used
Yeah.
from time to
I think
time.
it is.
But they actually had the big vehicles and horses and everything in
Oh,
there,
yeah.
didn't they?
Yeah.
Why'd they have that?
Oh, just a celebration, just a promotion.
Do you know how many took part?
No, I don't.
Were you in it?
No, I wasn't. Rainey, Mr. Rainey was quite a prominent citizen here at that time, and he's written some books about the Cherokee Strip, and he's got an authority on that part of Oklahoma. He was county superintendent of schools here a long time, and he was postmaster a long time. I think he was postmaster when he promoted and put on that pageant. See, I've seen it grow from about 10,000 to pretty near 50. We got 45, and well, it's kind of hard to pick out any one thing that happened.
What year did you first come here?
1911.
1911. Why don't you describe Enid? Just kind of close your eyes and recall what Enid was like in 1911.
Well, Enid was a good town. Even then, I think we had about 10,000 people. There was very little pavement. As I remember, the square wasn't paved at that time, and there were a lot of horses and buggies. There were no cars. About, I think there were only two or three automobiles in town, and they had hitching racks all over the square for the horses and buggies that were driven in there. Right down here from the hotel where this picture show is, was a wagon yard. And farmers used to come in there and do the shopping and stay overnight. And it just grown. We had, let me see, about 12 trains going out of here each way every day. That is passenger trains, and of course now we don't have any like most cities.
What did you drive when you came here? Have a wagon?
No, I walked.
You walked. Did most people during those days, before you had anything, did most people just walk or have wagons, or how did most people travel around?
Oh, in buggies.
Buggy was the popular thing. Did you ever have a buggy?
No.
You hitched your buggy to the hitching post, or hitched your horse to the hitching post with the buggy?
Oh, yeah. Everybody did.
Can you remember any, of course you didn't have radio then, you didn't have television, you didn't have so many of the types of entertainment that they had here. Why don't you talk about what you did? Now, you probably had less leisure time too, but what were the things that people did to entertain themselves in 1911 when you came here?
Well, we had a professional baseball team here then, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that. And picture show you could go to for a nickel. And
Rated G, I guess.
yeah, they were all rated G then.
What was the Enid team called? Enid baseball team.
I don't know. We were in the Western Association, along with Joplin and Springfield and a lot of those teams.
Fort Smith, eh?
Yeah, Fort Smith. And I don't remember what they called it.
Can you remember anything, any exciting event concerning baseball or baseball team?
The local team?
Yeah.
Well, no, not particularly. I remember the umpire, the professional umpire that was supposed to be here for a season, a couple of them, and one of them got drunk. Of course, he couldn't officiate, so they roped me in, and that's the only professional refereeing or umpiring I ever did. And of course, I remember that very well. But well, we had a pretty good team. I don't remember that we ever won a championship with the Western Association on that time, but we had pretty good players.
Did you produce any big leaguers?
No, well, we didn't. We had some big leaguers that were coming down and had played in the big league, like this Smith, the catcher. I've forgotten what his name was. And there were 2 or 3 of them around that had played big league baseball that were too old and too slow, so they were working their way out and down.
You didn't have any going up.
No.
That made it.
Mickey Mantle used to come in here and play all the time, but that was a good deal later than we're talking about.
Did you know Mickey Mantle?
Not personally.
Of course, he's Oklahoman. Come in. Oh, did you finish?
I'm all sure.
Well, fine.
How are you?
Oh, we're moving along. Move along real well. Come and listen. You can verify if he says anything that's not true. Will you?
You want me to criticize him?
Well, if he says anything that's not true, will you beep or something?
That I couldn't do.
You know, I wouldn't do that.
I know that too.
And you might also, if you think of some story that he has.
He's not asking me a lot of history and people's names that I'm embarrassed about. I can't remember.
Well, that's all right. We just
I just
pick
went
what we
through
did.
the same agony.
Agony. No, I asked about events. What maybe you can think of some event he ought to tell about that was a particular, thinking in terms of the high school, some outstanding event in the high school that might have occurred that would be worth thinking about.
I can tell you one.
Tell us one. This is Mr. Ed Fleming, Eddie.
I think the worst bawling out I ever got in my life was from Mr. DeWitt Waller.
Oh.
We were playing, we weren't playing, the high school was playing football, and I was the head linesman, and Mr. Waller was the referee. And he was clear across the field from me, and there was a penalty, and I didn't catch it. And he came over and wanted to know what I was doing, not watching those penalties. And I told him that I just didn't see it. Well, he said, "You're not worth a hoop when it comes to being the head linesman." So that was my experience with Mr. Waller as far as being balled out is concerned.
That was Mr. Ed Fleming from Enid, one of the illustrious pupils.
When it comes to being the head linesman. So that was my experience with Mr. Waller as far as being balled out is concerned.
That was Mr. Ed Fleming from Enid, one of the illustrious pupils of Mr. Waller.
I don't go back quite that far.
Thinking in terms of the superintendent, let's talk about the growth of the school system and some of the problems of growth that the school system had as Enid grew.
Well,
I'll be back.
we had a building problem, as you know, while I was superintendent because of the growth of Enid. I think we built about 6 or 8 grade schools, maybe 6, and of course staffing educational institution, spending like that is always a problem, but there were more teachers available then than there are now, really, so it wasn't too much of a problem. I'd say that our principal problem was housing the system and keeping it up where that everybody could be comfortable.
Can you think of any teachers that you had working under you who made an outstanding, were particularly outstanding, or who maybe have become particularly well known in some area?
Well, I don't know, Harold Duckett was one of our science teachers, and he became quite well known in that field and took a very important part in the science program of the state and the district, and had a good many students that won prizes in the science fairs, you know, and that sort of thing. And then we had Charlotte Cratch was one of our teachers. She taught for, I think 40 years maybe. And I think she holds a record. She was a marvelous teacher, and everybody loved her, and she was a great instructor. And she never missed a day or was late a day in 40 years on account of sickness or anything else. And she proved to be quite a favorite among parents and pupils, administrators, and everybody else.
Ot Watry, one of the, who later was, or who was 45th Artillery Commander, was one of your teachers, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then, now what is he now, principal, or is he superintendent?
He's superintendent school.
Is he superintendent? Did he follow you when you retired?
No, he didn't. He was a man here for 5 years between the time I retired and the time Autry was. He was a football coach. He coached football, and he was principal of Emerson Junior High School for a long time. He was principal of Enid High School for a long time before he became superintendent. I think he's one of the most remarkable people. If you talk about students and people that have been connected with an institution, he was under fire for 545 days in World War II. Actually under fire in Italy and in Korea. And he's a general in the National Guard. He's retired as a general. He made a very outstanding record.
As superintendent of schools, can you think of any particular events that were of interest?
Well, not particularly, as I remember it. Things went along pretty smoothly in those days, and I don't remember any particular outstanding events. Of course, we had a lot of them, but I wouldn't know which ones.
What about the community? What was the biggest thing that happened in the community of Enid during the years you were here?
The biggest thing in the community.
Or one of the biggest. Or maybe if not the biggest, the most exciting.
Well, I wouldn't know what to say about that. I really wouldn't know.
Would you have any comments on on education today as viewed in terms of education in night before World War I?
Well, yes, there are a lot of changes in education. A lot of advancement have been made. When you get into that phase of the education of history in the United States, it's been more or less repeating outfit. They've tried so many different things, the contract method and the classification method and all that sort of thing, and vocational education, and those things kind of go in circles. And everything they're talking about today, you've read about and known about and participated in practically. So, but I think great strides have been made, and I think there's some that need to be made. Of course, they're trying all sorts of experiences, but you know, it's hard to beat a classroom situation where you've got not more than 25 teachers, students, and a good teacher with the materials and implements that they need. I don't know of any plan or scheme that they've tried that beats that.
What have you done since you retired?
Nothing.
How long have you been retired?
Since 1959.
Just been enjoying things.
Yeah.
It's been a very interesting interview with Mr. DeWitt Waller, a longtime educator in the Enid area and former superintendent of schools for Enid.